The chiropractic adjustment to correct spinal misalignments is at the heart of what we do as chiropractors. And the reason why is because the spine is the centrality of the body mechanically, but is also highly integrated into your nervous system. And so when we start to improve your spine by correcting these spinal misalignments, we can have massive impacts on improving your health and your overall well-being, reducing symptoms such as pain. And so in this video, I want to go through the top 7 questions that people tend to have around the spinal misalignment and the chiropractic adjustment. So going into the very first one is, what is a spinal misalignment? A spinal misalignment is essentially an area of the spine, usually a specific joint in the spine that, as the name suggests, misaligns. It comes out of its optimal position. It starts to create these unhealthy movement patterns and it tends to move less. You get these restrictions. This is going to distort the way you start moving that area of the spine. And this is going to have 2 big impacts on the body. The first one is going to distort the mechanics. I like to compare this to a car tire. If the car tire is not aligned properly, you're going to get more wear and tear on certain areas of that tire. And in a crude way, this can happen with the body. If the body is not moving correctly, you can have more pressure, more wear and tear, and more injury to a certain area of the body. Now, that can be really any area, any tissue, such as a joint, so that can develop into wear and tear, or it can be ligaments or muscles or nerves or discs, whatever it may be. And so what we find is as we correct that, then those tissues that were injured then are able to heal. But the other impact is on the nervous system. So your nervous system normally requires healthy stimulation from your body to stay healthy. It needs stimulation. And it gets this stimulation from a variety of different areas, such as your ligaments, your muscles, and your joints, just to name a few. If we get an area of the spine that starts to move badly and starts to move less, particularly if this is more on one side over the other, you can start to get less signals going to the brain, and it may be less to one side over the other. And this can start to create these imbalances in the nervous system. And this is something that can contribute to nervous system issues such as migraines or dizziness, which is why we can often have a positive impact to things like migraines and dizziness by correcting the spine. Now, what causes spinal misalignments? There are essentially 3 different types of trauma that's going to cause them. Now, the first one is probably going to be the most prominent, and that is going to be physical trauma. We have 2 different types of physical trauma. The first one is your macro traumas. These are going to be like your falls, your slips, your car accidents, the knocks, the bangs, something that is a big impact to your body that's going to cause instant injury and an instant change in your mechanics. Sometimes, though, you can have the large trauma a long time ago, and then it's not until many years later when the final straw is laid on the camel's back, then the pain starts to come on. That's very, very typical. I very often hear that people just bend over to pick up a pen, and that's when their back pain started. Now, the second type of trauma is your chemical trauma. Now, this is the most common example of this is going to be essentially what you eat. And this is another reason to make sure that you're eating well, because this is going to impact your spine. And one of the biggest issues with eating badly is increasing inflammation in your body. And for some people, eating badly can really hinder their healing process if you're overcoming a certain pain issue. Now, the last type of trauma is going to be emotional trauma. The most common example, particularly nowadays, of this is going to be stress. Depression, anxiety can be another example, but stress is so common, and I so commonly hear it that people start to get an issue when stress increased in their life. And so if that is the case for you, it's really important that it is managed as best as possible. Obviously, it can be hard to take away the stressors sometimes, but there are things that you can do to implement into your day to help reduce this overall stress to your body. One of the most common things I like to give is a breathing exercise. So if you have a spinal misalignment, how can we fix it? Well, this is where the chiropractic adjustment comes in. The chiropractic adjustment, in my opinion, is the most effective and quickest way of correcting a spinal misalignment. If you remember back what I said a spinal misalignment is, it's a restricted and misaligned joint. So what we want to do in the adjustment is to reinitiate that movement back into that joint and to restore its position. Where the chiropractic adjustment becomes most effective is when it's done specifically. This is why using the hand, we make a specific contact onto the specific joint that's causing the problem. And normally we find that there is often one or two primary issues that we need to address. This is why we don't need to crack the whole spine, but we can just get that one joint that's causing the issue, then that can have massive impacts. Then what we do once we got that contact onto that joint with our hand, a very controlled force is put into that joint in a very specific direction to restore its motion and position. Now, as we do this, not always, but sometimes, or let's say a lot of the time, you're going to hear a click or a pop or a crack. And I know a lot of people can find this part very satisfying. Now, the cause of this comes down to something called Boyle's law. You may remember this, you may have learned this at school. When we increase the volume of an area, we're going to decrease the pressure. This is what happens in the joint. So when we move a joint, we're opening up and increasing the space within that joint. That's increasing the volume. And as we do that, we're going to decrease the pressure in that joint. Now, as a subsequent, we get a buildup or development of a gas bubble. And then that gas bubble very quickly pops. And that's what gives the noise. Now, for some joints, or for sometimes when we adjust a joint, that's not the case. And that's why you may not always hear the crack or the click. Now, just because you don't hear the noise doesn't mean an impact hasn't been made to that joint. And this is why we always like to reassess that joint to make sure that it's moving better than before we did that adjustment. And sometimes I like to redo some of the neurological tests to see if we made a positive impact on your nervous system, which quite often we will. Now, the adjustment is very, very rarely painful. Occasionally, particularly if you come in and you're very acute, very, very much in pain, the area is highly inflamed and sensitive, then yes, sometimes then it can be a bit painful. Usually it just feels like a sting that lasts a few seconds. But if that is the case, quite often we may not start on the direct area where you've got a lot of inflammation. We may do other things to try and bring that down before we start to work on that area. Now, the next question is how much? How many adjustments do you need in one session? Why can't you just adjust and crack every area of my spine? And you do see this on some videos on YouTube. What I find is that this is not an effective strategy. And for some people, you can really walk out feeling a lot worse. I like to compare this to titration. You may have remembered titration if you're not a chemist from your chemistry lessons, which is effectively a process where you're trying to achieve a specific endpoint without excess. And it's typically used to get the precise dose of either a drug or a certain substance. And this is a great example how careful, measured actions can lead to greater success. So not too little and not too much. You can compare this also to making your coffee in the morning. If you don't put enough grounds in, it's going to be too weak. But if you put too much grounds in, it's going to be too strong. And either way, it's going to be awful. If you get it just right, that's when it tastes the best. And the adjustments are similar. If we adjust too much too quickly, your body's not able to adapt effectively to that. It's also a high amount of stimulation to your nervous system. And what we find is that the net effect is not as good, and it can take longer for you to get better, and you're more likely to react to treatment. This is why we do careful measurements each session, and we monitor certain tests as we are treating you to be able to get the right amount of treatment for you that is optimal. This is how we tend to get better and quicker results. So what can you expect after you receive an adjustment? Well, most people will report feeling less pain, feeling better, feeling more movement, less restriction. They may feel more energy. Typically, they may sleep better that night. And this is all great things, great changes that gives us good confidence that we've made a good change. Sometimes though, that change actually may be negative. So sometimes you actually might feel quite tired afterwards. Maybe you don't sleep as well that night. Sometimes you can feel sore, particularly in the area that we've moved. The negative impacts tend to be a lot less common than the positive. However, if you do experience the negatives, particularly if you do feel sore, that's not too uncommon, and it's kind of like going to the gym. in particular the first couple times you go to the gym, you can expect to feel a bit sore after you go. And this can sometimes happen with the adjustments. Now, sometimes you can feel no different after the first session. And that's not too uncommon either. And if that's the case, the reason why is because we need to be able to improve the function high enough to go over that threshold that's going to allow you to start seeing the improvements in your symptoms. And so normally we'll start to see improvements within the first few sessions. Now, is it just the spine that chiropractors deal with? Well, no, it's not. But the reason why we concentrate on the spine is for the reasons that I explained at the beginning of this video. And this is because as we improve the spine, you've got the nerves that go out to your legs and to your hands and into your head. And so often we can make good improvements by treating the spine. And for some people, the cause may primarily be in the spine. So when we improve the spine, then the issue goes away. But sometimes there may be an actual issue in another joint in your body, such as your ankle, your knee, or your wrist. And so this is where we can assess that area and then treat the area in a similar way that we would with the spine. So you can get misalignments really in any joint of the body. And this can have an impact on nerves and the muscles in your extremities. And so we do deal with other things. And if you want to see a longer list of things the types of things that I treat, then my website is in the description below. Feel free to check that out and you can see more things that I treat, and I also write a lot about it so you can get more information. If you have an issue that you're wondering whether chiropractors or maybe me specifically can treat, then please feel free to put that in the comments. I'll be more than happy to answer that. Now, if you haven't seen an adjustment before, or even if you have and it's online, I do suggest to check out this. There's going to be a couple of videos that come onto the screen of me adjusting in the past, and you'll see how controlled the adjustment is and specific to a certain area. Some of the videos that you see online are very violent, and I think the main reason why is because they're trying to get large clicks and cracks to get as many views as possible. This is not necessary, and I know this can put some people off, so do watch those videos and you'll get an idea of what that looks like. Thank you again for watching. If you want to see more of these types of videos, then please feel free to subscribe, and I'll see you on my next one. Thanks for watching. Bye-bye.